I gave my rideshare driver coffee every night because loneliness makes small kindness feel like survival, and I never imagined that habit would save my life. The night he drove past my house and whispered something that froze my blood in my veins. I am Carol, and this is not a story about coincidence. This is a story about being watched while believing you are invisible, about danger hiding behind friendly waves, and about how the quietest people notice everything. I worked night shifts because sleep never came back after my husband died. The house feels louder at night, so I volunteered for the late audit rotations at the hospital. My job was numbers, patterns, discrepancies. It's the kind of work that turns fraud into evidence and evidence into prison sentences. Every night at 11:30, the same rideshare driver picked me up. Raymond, middle-aged, calm eyes, hands that never rush the wheel. I started bringing him coffee because grief teaches you how much warmth a simple cup can carry. We barely spoke at first, just thank you and drive safe, but over weeks silence turned into comfort and comfort into routine. I learned he drove nights to avoid empty days after his divorce. He learned I liked my coffee black because sweetness reminded me of things I lost. The neighborhood always looked peaceful when he dropped me off. White fences, trimmed lawns, porch lights glowing like nothing bad could happen there, but Raymond watched more than I did. He noticed cars that idled, too long shadows that moved twice, and lights that turned on when mine did. Across the street lived Thomas Brennan, a man who waved every morning and brought casseroles when my husband passed. He worked hospital maintenance, or so he said, friendly, helpful, forgettable. The most dangerous kind of person. The night everything changed, Raymond slowed down instead of stopping in front of my house. He drove past my driveway and parked under the oak tree at the corner. My heart pounded because routine breaking feels like thread. He leaned closer to the mirror and said quietly, "Do not get out yet. I need you to listen to me. I have been driving this route for 8 years, and I notice patterns. I notice who watches and who waits. Your neighbor across the street watches you every night." I laughed because fear often wears the mask of disbelief. Raymond did not smile. He told me, "Thomas leaves his house exactly 6 minutes after my headlights appear. He pretends to take out trash, but he is filming your door." I felt my skin go cold because suddenly memories rearranged themselves. The way Thomas always knew my schedule, the way he asked about my work, the way he once joked about audits and paperwork being dangerous for some people. Raymond told me he had dash cam footage, nights of it angles, timestamps, proof. He said he once followed Thomas by accident and saw him meet someone behind the hospital loading bay exchanging envelopes. My hands shook around the empty coffee cup because I knew what I was investigating: healthcare fraud, ghost repairs, inflated invoices, shell vendors, and I knew my team was close to naming someone from maintenance. The realization hit like a siren. Thomas was not a neighbor. He was a threat, and he knew exactly who I was. Raymond told me he debated telling me for weeks, afraid of being wrong, afraid of scaring me, but the night he saw Thomas testing the lock on his back gate, he decided silence was more dangerous than fear. We sat there breathing in the dark while my safe, quiet house felt suddenly hostile. I did not go inside that night. Raymond drove me to a diner and stayed until sunrise while I called my supervisor and then the police. When detectives reviewed Raymond's footage, the case exploded. Thomas Brennan was not just committing fraud, he was erasing witnesses, threatening auditors, and planning an accident for me. The man who once brought casseroles had a list of names, and mine was circled in red ink. He was arrested before the week ended, and later convicted on multiple charges, and as the courtroom doors closed, I realized something else had opened. Raymond and I were no longer strangers connected by a ride. We were two broken people who saw each other, and that changed everything. Where safety felt unfamiliar because even after Thomas Brennan was arrested, peace did not immediately return to my life. Fear lingers longer than danger, and every creak of the house sounded like a footstep that should not exist. I stayed with my sister for a few nights, but eventually routine called me back to my own walls. Raymond insisted on driving me every night, even when my rides were covered by the department. He said some habits are not broken when they keep people alive. The city looked different after what I learned. Every parked car felt intentional, every shadow meaningful. I realized how often we confuse normal with safe and how wrong that assumption can be. Raymond told me more during those drive stories he had kept, locked away, about his daughter Elena, how she stopped answering his calls after he missed her graduation because he had to work a double shift, how silence grew into years, and how driving nights helped him avoid the daylight reminders of regret. I listened because I finally understood the weight of unseen pain. My audit work intensified as the Brennan case opened a floodgate. Vendors dissolved invoices. Traced money flowed backward to names that thought themselves untouchable. I spent nights combing day-to-days in interviews, and somewhere in that chaos, Raymond became my anchor. He would hand me coffee before I even ask and say, "You did good tonight," as if he could see the invisible battles inside me. Detectives asked Raymond to testify. His footage was meticulous, time-stamped angles, overlapping patterns. Undeniable, he worried about retaliation, but said truth feels lighter than fear in the courtroom. Thomas would not look at me, not once. The man who smiled across hedges stared at the floor while his lies unraveled. Witnesses spoke, evidence stacked, and when the verdict came guilty on all counts, I felt relief, followed by grief. Because surviving does not erase what almost happened. It only changes who you are afterward. Raymond hugged me outside the courthouse, an awkward, gentle embrace between two people who had learned trust late in life. The story spread quietly at first. A rideshare driver who noticed too much, a widow who listened just enough, reporters called. But I declined attention because healing is not a performance. What mattered was the ripple effect. Raymond reconnected with Elena after a detective mentioned his bravery on a local segment. She recognized his voice and called him, crying, saying, "I saw you, Dad. I finally saw you," and that sentence meant more to him than any praise. He drove straighter after that, lighter, as if years of guilt had loosened their grip. I returned to my house and repainted the front door, a small act of reclaiming space. Neighbors checked in more often, the streetlights felt warmer, and I learned to accept help without shame. Kindness once given became kindness received, and every night when Raymond stopped at my driveway, he waited until I was inside, lights on, door locked, safe, not because danger demanded it anymore, but because care had become habit, and habit, when rooted in empathy, has the power to rewrite endings. From that night onward, when Raymond waited until I was safely inside my house, something quietly shifted in me. Because fear was no longer driving my awareness, intention was. I began noticing the world the way he did. Patterns, routines, pauses between movements that reveal truth. My work intensified as the Brennan case opened doors to other investigations, and I found myself calmer, sharper, more present, because surviving danger had stripped away hesitation. Raymond remained my driver, though neither of us needed the excuse anymore. Our conversations moved past the case into the deeper spaces of regret, forgiveness, and time he told me about. Elena in fragments at first, how silence had grown between them, how shame keeps parents quiet longer than anger ever could, and I listened because grief had taught me the same lesson. The courtroom appearances continued. Raymond steady and precise, his attention transforming into testimony. And when Elena appeared one afternoon, sitting quietly in the back row, the air changed. They did not speak then, but something repaired itself simply by being seen. Nights softened after that. My sleep grew deeper. The house relearned my presence, and the oak tree on the corner no longer felt like a warning marker, but a witness to survival. And I understood that healing does not announce itself. It arrives gently when the body believes the danger has truly passed. Time moved forward without ceremony, and with it came choices. Raymond began considering a daytime position, something he once avoided because light reminded him of everything he thought he failed, but now it felt like possibility. Elena started calling him again, first cautiously, then freely, conversations replacing years of absence, and I found myself invited into their shared space, not as a rescuer, but as someone woven naturally into their story. My work shifted from reaction to prevention. Policy reviews, training audits, built to stop harm before it began, and I realized justice is not only about punishment. It is about closing the gaps where cruelty hides the neighborhood change too, or maybe. I did waves lasted longer, people checked in more, and I repainted my front door, choosing a color that felt like me instead of something meant to disappear. Thomas became paperwork, dates, and final sentences. No longer a presence, and when Raymond walked me to the door each night, it was no longer protection from danger, but an expression of care, something freely chosen and freely given. Asterisk, what stayed with me most was not the night of fear or the courtroom victories, but the simplicity of how everything began, a cup of coffee offered without thought becoming the thread that saved a life and stitched others back together. I learned that kindness does not need grand intention to matter. It only needs consistency. Raymond eventually stopped driving nights, and when he did, it felt like graduation into a life he once thought closed. We still met for coffee, now across tables instead of dashboards. Sometimes Alina joined us, laughing easily, a sound that once felt impossible. My house became a place of rest instead of vigilance. And when I locked my door at night, it was not from fear but from peace, because safety is not the absence of threat. It is the presence of connection and noticing and choosing to care even when no one is watching. And that is how a routine became a lifeline, and how empathy quietly transformed all of us, including me,